rescue of Private Jessica Lynch.
Mike, today we heard more really heart-rending details of the rescue of Private Jessica Lynch. We heard them from CENTCOM, and
the Pentagon released its own night vision footage of the raid on Lynch's hospital room, complete with gunfire and soldiers kicking down doors. Later, it became clear that Lynch was in friendly hands and being well cared for at the hospital. Lynch herself told Diane Sawyer in an interview that she didn't know why the event was filmed and that it hurt her to know that the story had been largely fabricated. Regardless, 5 months later, Tom Brokaw opted to go with the Pentagon story over Lynch's for a Discovery Channel special.
The mission is a success. The 19-year-old supply clerk is the first American POW rescued from behind enemy lines since World War II.
The Lynch story is a good example of what media scholar George Gerbner has called instant history. Gerbner wrote after the first Gulf War that a boiling point is reached when the ability to wage war coincides with the ability to direct a movie about it. And indeed, we got the made-for-TV movie Saving Jessica Lynch just a few months after the event. But this was a natural decision for NBC as the script had already been penned by the Pentagon. This kind of movie making was not entirely new. If we look back to the first Gulf War, we find a made-for-TV film called The Heroes of Desert Storm, which was a joint production between ABC and the Pentagon.
Tonight's film is based on true stories and interweaves news footage and dramatizations with actors and actual participants. To achieve realism, no distinction is made among these elements.
Alongside scripted material and news footage, the film includes a welcome message from President Bush.
But the heroes of war are not just great leaders recorded by historians.
The film was the first of its kind, but it paved the way for future projects involving the mixing of public relations and dramatic filmmaking.
Look at that, would you? I pity the poor bastards down there. That's why they call it war.
Here, with the help of Billy Baldwin, the dramatic motif was Top Gun.
There'll be thousands of sorties flown here. When they get through, Saddam's military will be in the gravel business, because that's all that'll be left of them, baby.
In 2003, the story was borrowed from another film, Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan.
That's it, boy.
That's her.
Bingo.
Jessica Lynch. We're United States soldiers and we're here to take you home.
Another fine example of the manufacture of instant history was the celebrated toppling of the Saddam statue in Baghdad's main square.
Back at the statue, they'd found a ladder and a rope. The people were determined to topple Saddam.
Tell me, will you bring this statue down? Look at it!
A few hours later, they'd found a crane to do the job.
Here we had the appearance of a spontaneous act by throngs of liberated ordinary Iraqis.
If this had been planned in some way, which manifestly it was not, that we can tell, it could hardly have been more effective and more powerful a message.
Now, we have seen a reluctance on the part of U.S. troops to help out these particular scenes and not giving the impression.
But we find out later in an Army report that the event was staged by Army Psychological Operations. The report states, a Marine Corps colonel in the area saw the Saddam statue as a target of opportunity and decided that the statue must come down. The statue was later pulled down by a U.S. tank recovery vehicle. This was in every way a public relations event, designed to be broadcast as part of the Iraq War movie. And though virtually all networks went wall-to-wall with the toppling of the Saddam statue, they did little in the way of questioning the authenticity of the event.
Truth, with a capital T, is put in fine focus here like nowhere else.
That was a memorable day.
It was.
Did you watch all that?
I watched some of it. They had a guy hammering on it for a while, and I watched.
It took a while to pull it down.
Well, I watched him hammer, and then they said they're hooking it up, and they got the crane out there.
Indeed, this was a masterful highlight of the war movie.
The goosebumps. If you don't have goosebumps now, you'll never get them in your life. Britt, please stand by. Somebody who you've spoken to quite a bit.
The idea of war as spectacle has become so naturalized in our culture that Mad magazine could put out a very popular spoof movie poster. The tabloid show Inside Edition even decided to do a review of the Iraq War movie. The war practically had its own award show.
Much for joining us tonight. I'm Paula Zahn.
The war was a win for Paula Zahn.
CNN's anchor Paula Zahn won the prize of anchoring prime time. The news network.
But we need to ask ourselves, whom did the war movie benefit? What does it mean for how we regard the most destructive human endeavor? And are we better or worse off as a democracy because of it?
It has been a horrendous day of terror with two huge and deadly attacks, suicide bombings in Iraq and Israel. And we caution you, some of the pictures in our coverage tonight that you are about to see are extremely graphic.
In the north, we found that 80%.
The new television war is occasionally punctuated by scenes of intense violence, when insurgent bombs target Westerners, for example.
There was chaos and unimaginable horror. Everywhere, torn bodies, blood-soaked survivors.
We have not quite yet become used to these sudden floods of violent imagery, but the scenes afford a unique glimpse into the face of human suffering, and we identify with that face. This is only one side of the TV war we have come to know, however. The other side of the war, the receiving end of Western bombs, has no face at all. This war without victims, without bodies, and without suffering is the war we have become used to. This war is easy to watch on the couch with a bag of chips. This war is, above all, clean. The clean war has been a long time in the making, extending back to Vietnam, the first television war. Late in the war, when domestic dissent became widespread, policymakers associated it with a free press, calling the phenomenon the Vietnam Syndrome. Thus began the search for sophisticated methods to control wartime imagery in order to placate the home front. After experimenting with various forms of media restriction in the 1980s, the Pentagon arrived at the perfect formula for the 1991 Gulf War. Create conditions by which war appears short, abstract, sanitized, and even aesthetically beautiful. Minimize any sense of death, of soldiers or civilians. When these factors converged, President George H.W. Bush proclaimed, "By God, we've kicked the Vietnam Syndrome once and for all." The first step in constructing the clean war is to dehumanize destruction by extracting all human imagery from target areas. The clean war prefers the view from above.
Well, from a distance, probably about 100 miles away, you can see just glowing clouds from the clouds over above Baghdad.
The airfield is simply a fuzzy image on his radar. From his virtually windowless workstation, he'll program precise global positioning coordinates into each of the 2,000-pound JDAM bombs.
Cameras on the ground in this clean war tend to tilt to the sky rather than to the street. Weapons are endlessly touted for their precision, their seeming inability to hurt civilians.
Pound them with 2,000-pound bombs and then go in.
2,000-pound bombs in urban areas?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Mankind has never seen anything like this, and the important thing is its precision, Brett. That precision is designed to minimize the collateral damage.
And it was as precise as ever before in the history of warfare.
In the off chance that a civilian or two is killed, the clean war lets us know up front that it will be the fault of the enemy.
Where the Marines say the Iraqi government has been collecting and hiding leaflets dropped by the U.S., telling civilians how to stay safe.
The U.S. Central Command says Iraq plans on having its paramilitary forces attack Iraqi citizens while wearing military uniforms identical to those worn by U.S. and British troops. Iraq will then blame coalition forces for the atrocities.
Iraqi forces in Basra open fire on their own people as they run for freedom.
No one is sure if it was U.S. guns or the Iraqi military shooting its own citizens.
And if innocents are killed, the survivors will understand.
U.S. Marines mistakenly kill a family of farmers, then lend a hand to bury them, and wind up with thanks from the survivors.
The language used to describe the clean war is as antiseptic as the pictures. Bombings are airstrikes. A future bomb site is a target of opportunity. Unarmed areas are soft targets.